This presentation provides information on proposed changes to departure and arrival flight procedures implemented by the Federal Aviation Administration at Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport. Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport has been serving commercial passengers since 1947. The airport is often referred to by its aviation identifier, SDF. In 2002, UPS opened WorldPort, a package sorting center at Louisville International Airport. Over the years, UPS expanded their operations and in 2005 chose Louisville as its heavy air freight hub. The airport is now the third largest cargo airport in North America. As part of a nationwide program, the FAA is updating arrival and departure procedures to better connect SDF with other airports. This project is part of the FAA's nationwide strategy to modernize the entire national airspace system with satellite-based flight procedures. Why is this important? Modernization helps ensure that every city, including Louisville, is kept on the forefront of aviation technology, and that airports and overall airspace system have the structure to enable air traffic to move safely and efficiently throughout the country. We are also working to enhance aviation safety, reduce fuel emissions, and reduce delays, all while getting people and packages to their destinations quicker. Satellite-based procedures prepare the airport for the future. Airports are economic drivers for their communities. In 2022, the FAA control tower at SDF handled a busy mix of cargo, passenger, and general aviation traffic. The airport reached new heights with over 175,000 operations, providing vital connections to the residents and businesses around the Louisville area. How do planes approach and depart at Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport? Generally, aircraft take off and land into the wind, and runways are built to align with wind patterns specific to the area. SDF has 3 runways. 2 are in a north-south configuration, and 1 is in an east-west configuration. At SDF, air traffic control regularly changes runways to decrease air traffic volume of congested areas. This is called contraflow. It is the airport's primary noise abatement procedure and has been in place for several years. Scheduled runway changes for noise are set as follows: south flow from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. North flow from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. South flow from 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. North flow from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. However, when wind conditions, weather, or other air traffic circumstances require runway use other than noted, air traffic control will change flows to accommodate those needs and return to contraflow as soon as possible. Louisville is one of the few airports in the nation with extensive nighttime operations due to cargo activity. During nighttime operations, aircraft typically arrive from about 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and depart from about 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. How will the new satellite-based procedures improve traffic flow and reduce delays? Older procedures, including ground-based navigational aids, force aircraft to fly on invisible routes in the sky, passing over fixed points. Air traffic routes were therefore limited by the placement of these ground-based nav aids. Satellite-based procedures eliminate those ground-fixed points, allowing aircraft to fly in more direct routes, streamlining movement and reducing flight times. Satellite navigation is more precise, which means these routes will be more predictable while keeping aircraft safely separated. New arrival procedures will use optimized profile descents, or OPDs. OPDs enable aircraft to descend without leveling off. This enables aircraft to glide under minimal power, which can reduce aircraft engine noise and emissions. The new arrival procedures allow for near-idle power approaches while keeping aircraft higher as long as possible. Similar to arrivals, new departure routes will efficiently climb aircraft out of the airport to both domestic and international locations. Aircraft departing SDF Airport, day and night, will fly more consistent paths than they do today, while maintaining the airport's voluntary noise abatement measures. Arrivals and departures are now procedurally separated, allowing the controller to leave aircraft on published procedures and avoid eliminating unnecessary transmissions. Fewer transmissions reduces workload for the pilots and minimizes the likelihood of readback errors. As a resident, what will the new procedures mean for you? Travelers can anticipate a better flow of traffic in and out of SDF Airport, including reduced delays and improved travel in most weather conditions. Air traffic operations will become even safer through more predictable procedures. Planes will use less fuel, resulting in reduced carbon emissions. The number, type of aircraft, and operations at SDF, including passenger, cargo, business, and small general aviation, is market-driven. The FAA's mission is to move air traffic safely and efficiently. Updated air traffic procedures will help SDF maintain its position as a key airport in the nationwide system and help meet the demands of the future. Each new arrival and departure procedure meets FAA safety standards. All procedures went through industry flight simulations and flyability testing. The process to create, test, communicate, and ultimately publish a procedure typically takes well over 2 years. An environmental review is ongoing and will conclude after the public has had an opportunity to provide comments and those comments are evaluated. Would you like to know more? Please visit our website.
Welcome to the FAA's Public Information Workshop for the proposed performance-based navigation flight procedures at the Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport, or SDF. My name is Dan Mann, and I'm the Executive Director for the Louisville Regional Airport Authority. I thank the FAA for hosting this workshop and including the Louisville community as they assess proposed improvements to the nation's airspace system. We support events just like this one to engage with the community. We believe they provide an opportunity to inform others of the decision-making process, as well as the ability to directly respond to questions from airport neighbors and the community about these proposed enhancements to the airspace. I'd like to offer a little background about SDF for those who may not know. 8 airlines serve SDF, offering nonstop service to more than 35 destinations around the country. We are the fastest growing airport in the U.S. and expect to set new passenger records this year. I'm also proud that we are the home of UPS Worldport, the center of UPS's worldwide air network that moves millions of tons of product and life-saving cargo each year. Louisville is a global leader when it comes to cargo operations. We are the 3rd busiest cargo airport in North America and the 5th busiest in the world. SDF is an economic powerhouse for the region, generating $10.4 billion in economic impact annually. More importantly, the airport directly and indirectly is a source of more than 82,000 jobs and more than $450 million in state and local taxes. This is equal to 1 in 8 jobs in the metro area and nearly $1 of every $7 in Louisville metro tax revenue. With the importance of SDF to the region and its role as part of the nationwide airspace system, we appreciate you taking time to learn more about the proposed enhancements from the FAA. I also want to thank the FAA again for hosting this workshop and engaging the community in its discussions about the Louisville area. I wish you all a productive and informative meeting today. Thank you.
Welcome to the FAA's virtual public workshop on the proposed performance-based navigation, or PBN, flight procedures at the Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport. We're glad you could join us for this virtual meeting event. I'm Michael O'Hara, the Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region, and I'll be your moderator for today's meeting. Our nation's airspace is the busiest and most complex in the world, and the FAA mission is to ensure that every flight moves safely and efficiently throughout our airspace. As you saw in the project video, Louisville is certainly an important part of our aviation network. The purpose of this meeting is to inform the public on the proposed flight procedure changes at the Louisville International Airport and share some of the challenges we are working to address. First and foremost, these modifications are designed to increase safety and efficiency. There's a safety benefit when departures and arrivals are procedurally separated. This helps keep planes at a safe distance from each other and reduces the need for pilot-controller interaction. There are noise mitigation benefits when departures are able to climb to higher altitudes more quickly. For arrivals, there are benefits from new optimized profiles that allow for idle thrust descents, which may reduce noise and carbon emissions. With that quick intro, I'll walk through the agenda for our workshop. The meeting will start with the FAA's detailed presentation of the proposed flight procedures. Afterwards, our panel of experts will host a live Q&A session responding to your questions submitted on Zoom or YouTube. After the Q&A session, we'll adjourn the meeting with brief closing remarks. For those of you joining us on Zoom, your microphones are muted and your cameras are off. To submit a question during the Q&A session, please enter your written question in the Q&A tab on the Zoom platform. If you are attending this meeting on one of our social media channels, please click on the Q&A link in the comments section to be directed to our Google form. You can also post your question directly in the comments thread. If you're having technical issues connecting to the virtual meeting, you can text our technical support team at 949-478-0253 anytime during the workshop. This phone number is for text messages for technical support only. The FAA will be collecting comments on this proposal, so we encourage you to join the conversation. Please note, submitting a question during the live Q&A session today is not the same as providing a formal written comment. If you have a formal comment, you need to either mail them to the FAA at 10101 Hillwood Parkway, Fort Worth, Texas 76177, or email them to the address shown on the screen. All formal written comments must be sent by Friday, December 22nd, 2023. Now I will turn it over to Christian and Greg.
Hello, my name is Christian Cobbler, and I'm an air traffic control specialist in the FAA Control Tower at Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport. I have 20 years of experience controlling aircraft in the Louisville airspace. Today, we will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for the proposed arrival and departure procedures at Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport, also known as SDF. Each board will show either proposed departure or arrival procedures, along with current flight tracks, color-coded by altitude. Departures are referred to as SIDs, or Standard Instrument Departures. Arrivals are referred to as STARS, or Standard Terminal Arrival Routes. Proposed departure and arrival procedures will be shown on two separate boards, one providing an expanded view and another zoomed in to show additional detail. The flight tracks and procedures are overlaid on a street map of the surrounding area. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north at the top. Arrows for departure procedures point away from the airport, while arrows for arrival procedures point towards the airport. The spelling of each procedure name is limited to 5 letters. The departure identified with the letters S-P-I-L-R is pronounced Spiller. The proposed procedures allow aircraft to use satellites for guidance instead of ground-based navigational aids. The stars on the board represent locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that the aircraft fly to. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored paths show the proposed flight paths for both inbound and outbound aircraft. Surrounding the paths are dispersed path areas, in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. Aircraft in these areas are vectored to ensure proper spacing and sequencing between other aircraft. A vector is a compass heading assignment issued by an air traffic controller for aircraft to fly. These dispersed flight path areas also reflect flight tracks to avoid traffic conflicts, operational needs of controllers or pilots, or safety considerations. While aircraft departing or arriving may be vectored off the procedure for the reasons previously mentioned, controllers will prioritize utilizing the proposed procedures whenever air traffic conditions allow. The bullet points on the right side of the boards provide additional details about the procedures. Let's begin with an examination of the proposed departure procedures.
Hello, my name is Greg Petto, and I'm an air traffic controller at the Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport. I have over 23 years experience controlling aircraft in the Louisville airspace. On the following boards, I will introduce the proposed departure procedures. These procedures are called SIDs, Standard Instrument Departure Procedures. I will explain how aircraft will depart SDF Airport during both daytime and nighttime hours. The new departure procedures will be utilized both day and night, so aircraft departing during nighttime operations will fly more precise paths like they will during the day. This board shows an expanded view of the existing daytime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runway 35 left and 35 right. Daytime operations generally fall between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. This board shows a zoomed-in view of both the existing daytime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runway 35 left and 35 right. After collaboration with the Community Noise Forum, the proposed departure procedures were amended to relocate the runway 35 left initial waypoint to ensure that departing aircraft begin westbound turns farther north than today. This change will allow aircraft to avoid populated areas in West Louisville and keep flight paths over the river as much as possible. Similarly, the second waypoint off runway 35 right was moved to ensure that westbound flight paths remain over the river. This change mitigated equipment-related issues experienced by certain departing UPS aircraft. These equipment anomalies prevented the use of the more precise departure procedure and resulted in the use of inconsistent vectors. Aircraft departing runway 35 right eastbound will fly exactly as they do today, remaining over the river as much as possible. This board shows an expanded view of both the existing nighttime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runway 35 left and 35 right. As a major cargo hub, SDF is one of the few airports in the nation with extensive nighttime operations. UPS's nighttime operations fall primarily between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., which includes a heavy departure period between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Currently, nighttime operations do not utilize the GPS-based procedures that are employed during the daytime. This board shows a zoomed-in view of both the existing nighttime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runway 35 left and 35 right. This board shows an expanded view of both the existing daytime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runway 17 left and 17 right. As a reminder, daytime operations generally fall between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. This board shows a zoomed-in view of both the existing daytime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runways 17 left and 17 right. The initial waypoint off 17 right was relocated farther from the airport to allow westbound aircraft to turn beyond sensitive areas to the south while not deviating from the current daytime flight path. This board shows an expanded view of both the existing nighttime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runways 17 left and 17 right. Nighttime operations fall between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., which includes a heavy departure period between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Existing contraflow procedures dictate a preference for south departures during these hours, weather and winds permitting. This board shows a zoomed-in view of both the existing nighttime flight tracks and proposed SIDs for aircraft departing runway 17 right and 17 left. Again, the new departure procedures will be utilized both day and night, so aircraft departing during nighttime operations will fly more precise flight paths like they will during the day. Next, let's move to an examination of the proposed arrival procedures.
This board shows an expanded view of both the existing flight tracks and proposed arrival procedures called STARS for aircraft landing south on runway 17 left and 17 right. For arrivals from the southwest and southeast, aircraft landing runways 17 left or 17 right will fly the proposed procedures to a point where they are given vectors by controllers to the final approach course to land. For aircraft arriving from the northwest and northeast, the procedures will allow aircraft to join the final approach course and fly a controlled straight-in approach. This board shows a zoomed-in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed arrival procedures for aircraft landing south on runway 17 left and 17 right. This board shows an expanded view of the existing flight tracks and proposed arrival procedures for aircraft landing north on runway 35 left and 35 right. For arrivals from the northwest and northeast, Aircraft landing runways 35 left or 35 right will fly the proposed procedure to a point where they are then given vectors by controllers to the final approach course to land. For aircraft arriving from the southwest and southeast, the procedures will allow the aircraft to join the final approach course and fly a controlled straight-in approach. This board shows a zoomed-in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed arrival procedures for aircraft landing north on runway 35 left and 35 right.
Hello, my name is Gregory Hines, and I am an environmental protection specialist. In the following slides, I'll discuss the FAA study in environmental processes. Any changes to flight procedures must go through a study process. The proposed procedures go through numerous reviews, and the public can review and comment on the proposed action. The FAA is required to review and consider every comment. Once the agency has read and considered all comments, it decides whether to proceed with the project. The agency may adapt procedure changes that are identical or like the initial proposal, or the agency may make changes based on comments received from the public. The virtual proposed procedure workshops is an important part of the process that comes before implementation of the procedures. Before any changes can be made, the proposed procedures must also go through an environmental review, which was required by the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. NEPA requires that the agency evaluate environmental and related socioeconomic effects of the proposed action. The review includes a preliminary technical review, a preliminary environmental review, an internal review, and choice of appropriate NEPA review, which could include extraordinary circumstances and significant impacts. Thank you, and I turn it back over to Michael.
We're now ready to begin the live Q&A session with the expert panel. Again, we encourage you to submit any written comments you may have on the proposal. To do so, you may mail them to the FAA at 10101 Hillwood Parkway, Fort Worth, Texas 76177, or send them via email to the address shown on the screen. All formal written comments must be sent by Friday, December 22nd, 2023. Hello again. I'm Michael O'Hara. I'm the Regional Administrator for FAA Southern Region. Thank you for participating in our virtual public workshop. I'm the moderator for this discussion, and I look forward to hearing your questions about this proposal. You can submit your questions at any time by entering them into the Q&A window in Zoom, or if you're watching us live on YouTube, you can enter your questions into the Google form that's on your screen. Please note that these forms are for questions about this proposal only. Before we get started with questions and answers, I'd like to cover 3 quick items. First, if you're having technical issues connecting to the workshop, you can text our tech support anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253. For our audience that would like to use closed captions, click on Live Transcript on the lower portion of your Zoom screen and then select Show Subtitle. To remove the closed captions, click on Live Transcripts and click Hide Subtitle, and that will turn them off. Second, we have 90 minutes remaining in this workshop. This workshop tonight is the second of 2 workshops this week. And third, we are also live streaming on the FAA's YouTube channel. A recording of this workshop will be available on this channel immediately after this broadcast. The recording of the Tuesday afternoon workshop is already available. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Christian Cobbler is an FAA Air Traffic Control Specialist at Louisville International Airport. Jeffrey Chester is the FAA District Support Manager for Airspace and Procedures. Gregory Hines is an FAA Environmental Protection Specialist. Greg Petto is an FAA Procedure Specialist. Captain Jeff Kozak is a pilot for UPS Airlines. And Brian Sinwell is the Chief Operating Officer and Senior Vice President at the Louisville Regional Airport Authority. Thank you all for being a part of this panel and sharing your expertise with us. We're excited to discuss the work we're proposing at Louisville, answer the public questions, and continue this meaningful dialogue with members of the community. So to that end, let's start the session with our first question. As we start out, I'm going to ask Captain Jeff from UPS to talk a little bit about how they operate the different types of aircraft here at Louisville. I know UPS has a mixed fleet, including some very large aircraft. So good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, Michael. Yeah, we do operate very large aircraft in order to service our customers, because cargo airplanes are quite a bit different than the passenger airlines in that we try to get the most volume and to be able to carry it the greatest distance that we can, depending on the fleet. Our fleet consists of Airbus 300s, Boeing 757s, Boeing 767s, Boeing 747-400s, the Boeing 747-8, which is our newest aircraft, and then the airplane that I fly, which is the MD-11. And then one other thing I'd like to say about our fleet configuration is we pay particular attention to what is the best fit for our network that is also the most efficient, burns less CO2, and is quite a bit quieter. Our 747-8 is a perfect example of that. It can almost take off at 1 million pounds, and it is 30% quieter than the previous generation of that aircraft.
Great information. Thank you. As we heard in the video, Louisville is one of the few airports with a lot of nighttime activity due to the UPS Worldport. Captain Jeff, I won't keep picking on you, but if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a little bit about why cargo aircraft depart and arrive at night, how those operations are different than the daytime operations for UPS?
Well, overnight shipping is the quickest delivery option that we offer our customers that guarantee that delivery will be made at the next day. So, and it allows for the latest pickup, depending on your location, to the gateway, is probably the biggest thing. And that's why the larger majority of our flights fly in. You see them starting to arrive about 11 o'clock at night till about 2:30 in the morning. And then the departures start at about 3:30 in the morning and go till about 6:30.
All right, great. Thank you. Looking to see if anybody's chiming in, but we'll move to another question. When are these proposed procedures scheduled to start? I'll take that one unless someone else wants to jump in, but I'd say the earliest that we expect the new proposed procedures to be implemented would be the summer of 2024, probably the July timeframe. There's a question, will this change how pilots fly in and out of Louisville? Will this change how pilots fly in and out of Louisville? Sorry, I misread that. Jeff,
Yes.
Do you want to chime in on that one? Thank you.
Since I'm the only pilot on the panel, I'll go ahead and take that one. We essentially fly the same. Where the procedures really are enhanced is that we can do a smoother descent in using idle power, which makes us quieter, more fuel efficient, and less CO2 emissions. And that's when we tested all this in the sim. We validated all this in the simulation, in the simulators with Christian and Greg and a couple other folks from the FAA to ensure that everything was procedurally safe and met standards.
The question was about pilots, but anything about how we expect aircraft to be different from the FAA team? Christian?
Sure, Michael, I'll jump on that. I think Jeff made some good points. I think just to add that right now, while there are flight paths for aircraft, they're limited in the sense that there's no vertical guidance to them whatsoever. And so what we'll begin to see is now where the air traffic controller has to issue more transmissions, which is ultimately more instructions. It requires hear back. If I say something, I got to make sure you read it back right. And so there's a lot of aspects of that now with these new procedures. When you're a pilot who flies in, basically the plane will fly itself. It's not an entire flight to the runway by itself, but for the majority of it, if you're on these new procedures in and out, the aircraft will basically do it on its own. And that will eliminate a lot of the factors that we see today with, as I mentioned, communication, which is obviously often one of our biggest strengths, but can be one of our biggest weaknesses, because the more we talk, the more possibility for confusion lies. And the pilots are busy in the cockpit, and there's a lot going on, and trying to also listen to what they're being told when numerous instructions are being given can be confusing. So we're hoping to eliminate all that, not just for the pilots, but to the benefit of the controller, who can also then focus on other things, because they're not having to chip away at all these little transmissions.
And if I could just add one more thing, just to clarify, Kristen's correct. If we set up the airplane correctly and it's through the flight control panel, it will fly itself, but it still requires a pilot to do it.
And if I could touch on one thing, Michael, and I think Christian brought it up, and I'm not sure exactly answers the question, but I think it's a key component of what these new operational or the profile descents will do by reducing transmissions. Just think about every time you go to a drive-through and you give your order, and then you have to wait and make sure that they got it, get it right, or you have to read the screen and make sure that they got it right. Well, air traffic controllers do that thousands of times a day. And if we can reduce that number, just making sure they get it right, there's much, much less chance for error. So it's very, very significant for the controller and for the pilot to get things right, to make things safe that way.
Great. That's our primary mission, always focused on safety first. Thanks for the clarification or the additions there. Next question that we have on the video, it shows stars that are called waypoints, little star symbols that are called waypoints. And it looks like there are a lot of these for each procedure. How do airplanes fly to these, and how do they know which waypoint to fly to? We could pull up a sample board if that would be helpful. Greg Petto, do you want to answer that one?
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. The aircraft fly to waypoints by using area navigation or GPS. The waypoints are defined by latitude and longitude, and those are loaded into the aircraft's navigational database. So when a pilot inputs his flight plan route, the plane knows then which points to go to. It's much like when you get into the car and you want to take a long trip, it's going to have multiple stops. You plug in all your stops, and then the car is going to give you the directions on the way. So it's a lot like that. And once they're all loaded in, along that route of flight, the turns along the route are automatically programmed in for the aircraft.
Great analogy. Thanks, Greg. All right, I'm going to move to the next question. If this new proposal is based on satellite guidance, is UPS paying for it, or are our taxpayers paying for it? So I can jump in on that. Feel free, anybody else who wants to, but these proposed changes are certainly part of the FAA's effort to modernize the national airspace system. And we're working to do that, including how we see aircraft, how we communicate with aircraft, and how aircraft are able to navigate. So our primary mission is safety, and also the efficiency of the national airspace system. And these changes at Louisville are part of a national effort to continually improve our safety and efficiency nationwide. I know the project video mentioned it, but Louisville is certainly a key airport in the national airspace system. But when you think about the connectivity, every airplane is taking off at one airport and landing in a different one. So challenges at one airport can create a ripple effect that quickly builds up around the country. So we want every airport to be as efficient as it can be, again, with safety as our primary goal. Not seeing anybody else jump in on that one. I'm going to move to the next question. Will there be more takeoffs and arrivals under this new proposed improvement, the proposed changes? Greg, do you want to?
Well, short answer is that these procedures were designed for efficiency and not necessarily to move more planes through the system, or allow more planes to use the airport, but more so to allow those planes to get to and from the airport in an efficient and safer manner. The current separation standards for air traffic are still required. There's no decrease in that. And in terms of flight numbers, that's all driven by market demand, and that's something that we don't really have a say in.
That's a great point. FAA, again, our responsibility is to move the aircraft that want to come and go from a given airport at whatever times they're scheduled. That's how the system operates, and that's our mission. So whatever's coming at us, or whatever's coming at you all, I'm not a controller, but whatever's coming into the system, you all handle, again, as safely and efficiently as possible. I'm just going to add something else. Greg, I'm sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, I just add to what Greg says. That's absolutely correct. Our customers determine the amount of volume that's in the amount of airplanes that come in, not the efficiencies of this airspace redesign.
That's a great point too, Jeff. So the demand for services, whether it's UPS or a particular airline, they're scheduling to meet the demand that the public's looking, in this case, to get in and out of the Louisville area. Christian?
Well, I think everybody's probably covered it now, but I did think we get this question a lot. I think it's a great question because a lot of times when we think better means more. I think in this case, I got to describe this the other day to somebody where I kind of said, I've lived in Douglas Hills area, like Forest area. I've moved quite a few now in Goshen. If there were to be a incredibly troubling four-way stop somewhere, say in J-Town or something like that, and I know, Michael, you're not from the area, so you don't know, but I think our Louisville folks will know what I'm talking about. If there was a really convenient roundabout put in there that kind of saved everybody from this terrible four-way stop, I'm not going to drive from Goshen to go over to check it out. It's just, that's not how it works. It's going to be convenient for the people that live there. They're going to see a benefit of it, but we're not going to travel to those areas just to see the roundabout. And I think it's going to be the same thing with the airport. People going to Philadelphia are going to go to Philadelphia. People going to Los Angeles are going to Los Angeles. It won't be impacted in that way. It's just purely market driven by what we do here in the local area.
Great. Thanks for the teamwork on that one. I think the point I was going to clarify earlier, we mentioned it earlier, but that procedural separation, I think, is a key aspect. So to me, it's more about how the aircraft are moving through the airspace and doing that more safely, procedurally separated with more predictability about where that aircraft will be, and a common picture between the air traffic controller, the pilot, and really what's programmed into the aircraft itself. So none of that speaks to a different way the aircraft move, including the optimized profile descents and some reduced power thrust on arrival, maybe some higher altitudes. But really that's what the project's about, not about specifically anything about more aircraft. Okay, hopefully we covered that. We have another question. Sound abatement programs have not been afforded to the residents on the west side of the airport. Why is that? Brian, it's not specifically related to this project, but is there anything you want to share on that question?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Good question. We understand that noise affects many of our neighbors, and the mitigation program areas that we continue to reach are limited to guidelines contained in the Part 150 Airport Noise Compatibility Planning document, an FAA document and plan. So the current program just is contained in those areas because they meet those federal guidelines in that Part 150 plan.
All right. So following the guidelines. Thank you, Brian. All right, here we have another question. If there is an increase in takeoffs and arrivals, then how will the FAA or airport control the increased noise levels? We touched a little bit on that. The project's not specifically driving increased traffic, but down the road, if there is more traffic, anybody have thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, Michael, I can add that the current compatibility program that we have in place and noise abatement procedure will remain in place. And to follow on to that, the airport is currently in the process of updating the noise exposure maps, and those procedures that we're talking about will be included in that update.
All right, thanks, Brian. Gregory, anything to add from your experience?
No, excuse me. No, Michael, I think Brian answered the question from our standpoint. We have completed our noise analysis, and we didn't have any significant impact or any reportable quantities. So I would just say that from our perspective, but the majority of that answer to that question was provided by Brian, and I think he did a great job of answering it.
Yeah, I agree. And thanks, Brian, for pointing out the consistency and maintaining the current noise abatement procedures. Okay, the next question. Will these new procedures increase horizontal separation for GA or general aviation aircraft working in the Class C, which is a type of airspace? We may want to explain that one. But will it increase the horizontal separation for GA aircraft working in Class C airspace near the arrival and departure paths at SDF, at the Louisville Airport? Christian, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure, Michael. I think a lot of this entire project was balancing greatest benefit. And in the case of arrivals and departures, having consistency in their flight paths and their flight tracks, planning for the pilots, expectations for the controllers, those were what were prioritized. And so if the other variables that come into play, we have numerous helicopters that have to go downtown for medevac status. We have airports that are very close to Standiford, but those variables can be moved a little bit on a time-by-time basis depending on what's going on. So I feel like what we find is we chose to lock down procedures and deal with the variables as we come. Greg, am I explaining that? You think probably to the best?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is the lateral separation standards aren't changing. And that question specifically was about aircraft within the Class C airspace. To go in a little bit of background, the airspace designations are given letters in the United States, starting with A, which is high altitude airspace. Class B, or Bravo as we call it, Class B airspace, is at your larger airports, more restrictive, much larger in its expanse. But a Class C airspace is what we have at Louisville, and it resembles an upside down wedding cake. The center core around the airport itself is 5 nautical mile radius. And then there's a shelf that extends another 5 nautical miles out to the 10. And so aircraft within that controlled airspace is afforded separation by air traffic control. And also you need a clearance to get into it. And two-way radio communication is required. So to that question, lateral separation standards are not going to change. But one thing it will do is it'll make all the departures and arrivals more predictable. We'll know where those departures are going every time. Whereas now, say at night, sometimes we're not utilizing those GPS-based procedures. So the aircraft are on headings, and those headings make the aircraft stray when there's winds aloft. They're not independent of the wind. So use of these procedures will make separation a little bit more predictable when we do need to shift into a different plan, I guess, for those aircraft, like helicopters, for instance.
All right, great answer. Thank you both. Right, under the new proposal, how far from the takeoff point for runway 17 right will planes start the turns to the west? Greg, do you have that number or distance?
Yep. In fact, do we have on that? I think if we were to bring up the south flow departures slide from the presentation, it was the zoomed in version. That'll show it. I don't mean to put anyone on the spot to display that, but I mean, the short answer on that is that we worked to move the departure, that turn waypoint, that initial waypoint for the 17 right departures. We worked to move that further south so that it would force those aircraft to start those turns when they're further away from some sensitive areas down south of the airport, their neighborhoods, and also to include the Jefferson Memorial Forest. So here's the slide. Thank you. Yep. So on this board, you can see the star south of the airport, and that's the point where those aircraft will start the westbound turn. and you can see the colored tracks are where aircraft were making those turns prior or at current day. This is what they're doing today. So the new procedures were worked to improve the flow and also have those turns at a more strategic point. We also did this to the south, or sorry, when we depart to the north, we moved waypoints further north so those aircraft would turn over the river, and that would keep those turns over the lesser populated areas that way. Christian, did you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I think what we see here is the biggest impact comes from folks. And if I think I'm reading this question right, is about where we talk about turns and where do those turns happen? Well, people are affected most by the turns at night, and the turns happen because we are assigning headings at night, have for years. That's just been the procedure here. And so during the day we had these procedures, during night we didn't. And so what that meant was, when the aircraft took off, there was always some variability where that plane, not only the same aircraft, but different aircraft, different crews, different flights, different airlines. There were so many variables at play that the aircraft all turned at different points. And sometimes because they were assigned a heading, that meant that turn happened pretty quick. That's all eliminated, virtually all eliminated in this now. And we'll see the vast majority of aircraft fly these procedures where they will go out 4 to 5 miles before they start those westbound turns. There won't be any more, especially at night, take off and turn to a heading. It'll be take off, follow a track, and then go out 5 miles and turn to a heading. And I think that's one of the areas, especially as we showed this graphic here, the folks to the southwest of the airport, I think, will probably see some of the biggest benefits. I mean, we didn't prioritize anybody, but the way the procedures play out and the way we run our operations here nightly, I think the folks to the southwest of the airport, because of those new procedures at night too, will see a good benefit.
That's a good point. I also want to follow on and say that, we try and utilize our procedures as much as possible, and these new procedures especially so, because they're going to be better for the pilots, better for the controllers. The one thing that might force us to take aircraft off of those procedures would be, say, a thunderstorm parked south of the airport. And that's not something that we would want to launch any aircraft into. So that may force us to use an alternate heading. Those cases are rare, and it's one of our last resorts, but also military airspace, police operations, that sort of thing. Those are things that often make us switch the playbook.
And if I can just jump in, I think just to clarify a point, when you see all those tracks out there and you see all where each individual aircraft flew, you can see a wide variability under that. And with these new departure procedures under ideal conditions, I think, as Greg pointed out, if it's ideal conditions, you should see a very, very narrow track of aircraft. Those aircraft should virtually be all on the same path, eliminating 99% of that variability, which I think is going to be better for everybody and much easier for the controllers. So.
All right, we had a question. Could you please show the zoomed in slides of proposed flights again? So I know we had one up there. I don't know if that was the zoomed in view. Maybe we could walk back through kind of the zoom in, probably departures. I don't know. We could show departures or arrivals, but Greg, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, so this is the northbound departure board, and it shows the waypoints, the 2 stars there north of the airport. On the left side, those are the 3-5 left SIDS, and the aircraft will track shortest distance across the city to hit the river, and then they'll hit that waypoint, and that's when they'll execute their turns. On the right-hand side, I mentioned in that recorded video, we worked with the noise forum to ensure that the aircraft would remain over the river when turning westbound off the east runway. That'd be runway 35 right, and also eastbound. So we tweaked that departure a little bit. We saw an opportunity to improve some of the procedures we're currently utilizing, and we moved that waypoint further north to ensure that that turn would be possible.
And if I can just add, Greg, the going off 35 right, turning westbound as well, there's a better flight track over the river. The aircraft were pushed to an angle that they didn't kind of shortcut on the north side of downtown. They actually go out now over the river and track and then make their westbound turn. So as much operation away from humanity is what we were really shooting for, knowing that it's a city and people live here. and there was going to be some of that, but as many options as we could find to keep it over lesser inhabited areas and also focused on safety.
Great. So we had the southbound departures up just a moment ago. This shows the northbound up here for a minute. We can leave that up while I'm answering this one, but there was a question, will the slides showing the existing and proposed flight paths be available after the presentation? And the answer to that is this workshop, as well as the workshop 2 days ago on Tuesday afternoon, both workshops either are or were recorded, and they'll be available for future viewing, I would say indefinitely, on our FAA YouTube website, and we'll also have a link probably in the next day or so on our community engagement webpage, the same page that you were able to come to register for the workshop or see the flyer for the workshop. We'll be switching that out to include a link to both of those videos. But you can find them today on FAA's YouTube channel. You can also find that community engagement site one of two ways. If you just do a quick internet search for FAA community engagement, you can scroll down a little bit. You'll see a map. You can click on the southern region, which is the southeast part of the United States. You'll see Kentucky highlighted in that part of the country. That's the region I'm responsible for. If you click on that and scroll down a little bit, you'll see a list of our current projects that include Louisville. You can also go to FAA Southern Region and go to noise or community involvement, and all of those will take you to a link to the Louisville page. That link is also included in the video again. So I think we have that up at the end of the session. So any updates to materials, if we update any information on the project, it'll be on that Louisville project webpage. Again, the same one that we pointed people to register. Okay. All right, here's a question. Can we ask a pilot, Jeff? How do these procedures benefit you as pilot of the aircraft?
Well, from testing in the simulator with Christian and Greg and a couple others, like I said before, really illustrated that now we have more predictable routes, as Christian said, on departure, and more efficient arrival. So it really it really speaks to the efficiency of the aircraft. When we do those optimized descent profile or profile descents, we're at idle power, and that makes it quieter, and we save fuel and consequently burn less CO2 as part of that. In our study of that, we revealed that we saved about 60,000 pounds less CO2 emissions over the course of a year. But most importantly, it's the safety aspect, which we touched on a little bit earlier. When you have a more predictable route in arrival, it makes it safer. Also, with the airspace changing, less radio calls at our most busiest time in the cockpit is coming into the approach, configuring to land. And so reducing the amount of radio transmissions really improves our situational awareness and lets us focus on the task at hand. So again, it really speaks to the efficiency, safety, and sustainability. And the other thing that I discovered is really it's a win-win-win for everybody. It's a win for the community because it's going to be quieter, and so they should hear less noise, much more efficient, and then the sustainability part that I already covered.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I may ask you to clarify. So I'm not a pilot, but really you mentioned the task at hand. So I mean, a pilot's primary focus is flying the airplane, right? It's a complex, by all definitions, pretty complex machine, and so anything that allows you to know the procedures you're taking and the steps ahead. What comes to mind for me is if you've been driving a car. I know we use that example some, but if you're driving a car, but someone else is navigating, and they're like, turn right here, and it's sort of that last minute, as opposed to you having the course in mind that really helps you know what's coming and plan accordingly. I'm not sure if that was fair or not, but maybe that helps for those of us that aren't pilots.
Well, the complexity is coming in for arrival, and Christian's not understanding if I don't get that navigation exactly right. In fact, he might even ask me to call him after I land to talk about it. Is that we don't have the ability to stop. We don't have the ability to pull over. So, and then the altitude is a very important part. We're assigned those altitudes. That's an agreement that we have on the arrivals with the piloted controllers. So there's in that condensed amount of time, not only are you paying attention to all the altitudes, the navigation, but then you got to configure the airplane to land. You got to slow it. You begin with putting the slats out, the flaps out, the gear, preparing to land. Right after we do all that, they give us a radio call or a radio frequency chain to talk to tower to get approval to land. And so it's there's a lot in there. And of course, there's a couple of checklists as well.
Right. A lot going on in the cockpit. All right. So I think this next question ties in. When you say these procedures are safer, or when we say that, I guess, what does that mean? Is it safer for the passengers or people on the ground? I mean, essentially, maybe all of that. Christian, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. And I think I kind of piggyback off what Jeff just said, win, win, win. It's safer for the folks on board. I mean, we've got UPS on the panel. It's very easy to focus on packages, but that's not true. As we know, there's a lot of people flying. My wife, my daughter just flew out tonight, so it means something to me. It means something to the community. It means something to the pilots. It means something to all of us. So it's really having that safety consideration is very important on many facets. How do we consider improving safety? Well, as we mentioned, we get away from ground-based navigational aids. They go out sometimes. They need a lot of maintenance. They're old. They're not unsafe, but they're starting to get to be the wave of the past and not the wave of the future, right? So navigational aids, satellite navigation is just a much better operation. The procedures being separated, we've mentioned this a couple of times, procedurally separated, where now when a pilot comes in and I say, I assign a certain altitude, there's some variability there, right? Maybe the aircraft gets to a certain altitude that I assigned here, maybe back a little farther. It's not an unsafe operation, but the variability is what adds to the questions and concerns. This eliminates that both on departure and arrival. We know exactly where everybody's going to be every time, and so do the pilots. And so I think that's probably the best case. And I think I've used this example a couple times where I've tried to use this as an example where, 10 years ago, had I bought a motorcycle and a helmet, I would have been safe. But if I buy a motorcycle and a helmet today, I'm safer. Technology has just come farther. The understanding of protection and equipment is better now. I wasn't unsafe to safe. I'm just safer. And so that's what we're shooting for here. Experiences taught us kind of how these things, where we can make improvements. And that's, I think, what we focused on in this project. And I think we've got a good path forward. Greg, please, as the other guy on the tower, tell me if I left something out.
No, I think you covered a lot of it. The one thing I like to mention is the procedural separation example that I think is going to be most surprising is right now our arrivals come in and the controllers give them a manual descent once they cross into the airspace boundary for Louisville. Our departures climb off and they have a prescribed route of flight, at least during the day when they're using the satellite-based navigation. They have a prescribed route of flight. But for instance, aircraft departing runway 17 left that are going eastbound to the East Coast, they have to cross the arrival stream coming from the southeast. And inevitably, as you know, we joke here, as soon as I get a departure off of 17 left going east, I'm going to have a stream that he's going to have to tangle with. And they're not vertically separated automatically. So I have to make a decision as a controller. Do I let the departure stay on the filed route, which is preferable to the flight crew? But that may force him to stay lower. And as Jeff alluded to earlier, aircraft leveling, it's noisier, it's more workload on the flight crew. So we like to keep them climbing. So then I would have to take that aircraft and turn him on course sooner to keep the climb going. But that creates a lot of unpredictability. So now the new procedures are going to be procedurally separated in a way that the arrivals and the departures are crossing with the prescribed lateral and vertical separation, and it allows us to focus on other safety-related tasks.
Okay, very good. So specifically back to the question, I mean, certainly safer for anybody who's flying, but in the event of an issue with an aircraft flying, I mean, that always in a worst case could have a potential impact for people on the ground. But really, when we think about ground impacts, given the safety record that we have, we're really talking about, some of the environmental benefits, et cetera. So hopefully that helps address that question. We have a question for Gregory. I think you'll want this one, but how do we continue to stay informed on what's happening with these procedures and any potential noise impacts if people want to continue to follow the project?
Yes, Michael, thank you. I'd just like to reiterate, what you had answered previously from a previous question, actually, that was brought forth just a few months ago. The public workshops are conducted this week will be recorded for future review on YouTube and our community engagement website, which can be found at faa.gov. And what will happen is citizens can go there and to get additional information about the process that we've conducted these 2 workshops, and any other pertinent information. They'll be able to find it there on that community environment page on faa.gov.
Very good. Thank you. That homepage, that page for the project is going to be a great resource if you want to stay current on where the project is moving forward. All right, next question. Why do airplanes fly to the north at night? We've been told that aircraft must depart and land to the south. I know the video talked some about, in the video we spoke to different times of day. Christian, do you want to start with this one?
Sure, and I think the base answer is safety. Okay, so we have a plan, we have an ideal, and then we look at safety considerations. Well, what would be a safety consideration that would make us go opposite of what we plan? Wind would be a primary one. Aircraft generate lift. They like to take off and land into the wind. They can take tailwinds, but as we drift into higher and higher tailwinds, safety concerns go up and up and up. And I know Captain Kozak does not like to land in a tailwind. It's just nice to have that headwind. I won't get into the details of aerodynamics, but it's just better. And so on nights where we have strong headwinds or winds out of the north, that kind of necessitates aircraft landing and departing into that headwind. And so fortunately in this area, because the way the winds are, south works the majority of the time, kind of keeps us away from the primary areas in the city, but it's all flexible, it's variable, and sometimes people have even seen aircraft take off to the west around runway 29. We don't use that runway too often, but it just happens. That would be the primary reason, is we're looking at wind considerations almost certainly. And I guess Greg, if I can just finish up here, I see you jumping in. Thunderstorms, other activity like that. We won't really move. We won't change flows for just somebody flying around. But if we're supposed to go south and there's significant weather to the south, it's just not safe. So we'll change it around. Sorry, Greg.
No, thanks, Christian. I just wanted to circle back and give a little bit more background on the contraflow that was mentioned in the video. So that's a noise abatement measure that the airport has in place, and the tower tries to comply with to the best of our ability. The contraflow means that we, in theory, would land all the arrivals to the north during the nighttime hours, and then when the departure push starts, and it's unique because of the nature of the cargo operation. So it's all in, and then they sort the packages, load the planes, and then they all go back out. So when the departures go out, if we can, we depart south to try and keep the noise off of the more populated areas in town. So the question, I think, is about, well, how come you're not doing that? So sometimes on the arrival push, we have to land south because of the wind or weather. And same reason for the north departures. The other thing too is, in earlier this summer, we had a lot of military activity. Fort Knox has an active restricted area south of Louisville, and when activities inside that restricted area are going on, we sometimes have to avoid that area and give a little bit more room for the aircraft. So that's another thing that drives that decision.
Okay, thank you both. I think that covers that. Good examples. So the next question, has this project given any consideration to including operational measures that were proposed in the airport's last noise study, but not approved because of limitations on technology, or maybe it means fleet mix. It says flight mix, but existing at the time. Brian, I don't know if you have any background on that, or if our team does, but I'll start with you, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, the like we stated before, the current noise abatement procedures will remain in place. And I would say that the non-approved Part 150 abatement measures were not considered in this project.
All right. I don't see anybody else with anything to add to that one. Thank you, Brian. So next question I see, what effect will these new routes have on small aircraft, specifically helicopters? Christian?
Thank you, Michael. The new routes will have, I would say, essentially no impact on helicopters. Most everything that we're talking about that's change-wise happens significant distances from the airport, except for some of the tweaks we talked about on the departure paths, where we kept things consistent at night and extended the departure paths a little bit to accommodate noise concerns. We value our helicopters. We have military helicopters, medevac helicopters that take people to and from downtown. We know how critical their operation is. I think Captain Kozak kind of mentioned this earlier, that we're looking at them as folks that can stop. Like Captain Kozak's plane can't stop, and it's not going to be as maneuverable in kind of these tight, close in. We're talking maybe within 5 miles of the airport. Captain Kozak's plane goes from 0 miles from the airport to 5 miles from the airport incredibly quick, where our helicopters are much more maneuverable. So we kind of rely on our helicopters to help us navigate around them. And they do a great job. Appreciate the work they do, but we kind of rely on them, honestly, to help make things run smoothly. But as far as these new procedures, they shouldn't be impacted by them at all. But if they have concerns, or if anybody's seen any concerns, they could feel free to reach out to the tower if something that's happened to them that they don't like, and let us know. But as far as current day procedural operations, they should not be affected.
Very good. Thanks, Christian. Okay, the next question, will you keep ground-based capabilities? I guess that word's not there, but as a backup in case of sunspots or other technical issues with the satellites? Are you using low Earth orbit satellites? Okay, so that may be a joint question for equipment on aircraft as well as part of our system. Jeffrey, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can jump in there a little bit. We do occasionally have GPS related issues to this day. It does happen. At that point, we'll fall back to vectors. We'll fall back to radar vectors. There are still a lot of ground-based navigational aids in place. Those aren't necessarily going away. We're just not focusing on their use. They're not nearly as efficient. They're already in place. We can't move those around. We can't get the best flight paths with those when we're designing a procedure. So using the GPS and the waypoints is a much better system to set that up. But if for some reason those would be unavailable for a very brief or limited time, then we would just go back to radar vectors. We would rely on the controllers and the pilots and their communication levels. And while that would reduce the efficiency, that's kind of part of the fail-safe of the FAA, right? It is the people on the ground managing the pilots in the sky, and the pilots in the sky, doing a great job of listening and following instructions. So while we do have that fail-safe in place, the GPS system has been proven to be extremely reliable and have very, very limited issues. So that's where I would be on that answer.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Captain Jeff?
Yeah, as for the equipment on the airplane, we certainly do have the capability to tune in many navigational aids like a TACAN or VOR or the instrument landing system, ILS system. As far as GPS signal, yeah, our airplane gets the GPS signal, but it really is increasing accuracy of our internal navigation system, our gyros on the plane. So it takes that signal and then it does the computation between those three internal navigation systems to get the most accurate point that we are in the world. So, but if we were to lose them, we have procedures and checklists to deal with that problem if it were to occur.
And Jeff, that reminds me of one of the earlier questions asked, may have been our first question, asked about project cost, if you will, not specifically the dollar amount, but who's paying. And it reminds me that really there's a partnership between the FAA and users of the system. So we can design procedures, but aircraft need to be equipped to take advantage of those. So you just touched on equipment, but an aircraft manufactured 30 years ago and not updated wouldn't probably be able to take advantage of all this. So there is an investment on the part of the airlines to be able to utilize the technology. I know I'm jumping back to a prior question, but any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because all airplanes that fly into Louisville, and I think Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, pay a landing fee to be able to land at that airport. And you can imagine that, I think the number said it, UPS pays quite a bit in taxes and in landing fees to support these programs. So we are committed to the community.
It's a team effort. Thanks. I just wanted to draw the point out. It's not really one-sided with any of this. So thanks for the clarification. We touched on this a little bit earlier. The question, will these procedures potentially increase air traffic? Jeffrey, any input there?
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll just say that while we did talk about it, and really the market demand drives the numbers of aircraft. These procedures are designed to increase efficiency and take advantage of new technology to increase safety. That is their primary focus. And while it may allow for the opportunity for more aircraft to take off and land at SDF, they're not designed specifically for that or with that in mind at all. The FAA doesn't tell how many airplanes are going to go to Louisville or Indianapolis or any place else. That's strictly driven by market and by aircraft and or airline desires.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And I think, Greg, you made the point earlier that we're not changing separation standards. So when it comes down to how close aircraft can be to one another, those standards are not changing related to this technology, these proposed procedures.
That's right. Not at all. We don't anticipate an increase in density per se, but again, it's up to the market whether or not more flights are scheduled.
Okay, hopefully that's helpful.
And I would add one more thing to it, Michael. It's also events, right? We have Thunder over Louisville and the Kentucky Derby. That brings in a lot of traffic. We also have this thing called Peak at UPS where we do all the deliveries through the holiday seasons, and that increases traffic as well. So it's really the demand based on events or market conditions.
There's a timely message. Thanks, Jeff. Absolutely. Yeah, airports have their own characteristics, right? The seasonality, if you will, and the demand of those events. Again, really driven by the interest that the demand that the public has for services, whether it's flights themselves or the goods and services that are flying in and out. I didn't touch on that earlier, but aviation plays a key role in our nation's economy. And we want to make sure that people get where they want to be, whether it's family or business travel. And again, in the case of Louisville, packages are an important part of that. All right. The next question, it looks like some of these stars or arrival routes tie into an approach, but the graphic, well, maybe that's stars the other way. In any event, I don't know if that's star the symbol or stars the arrival route. Some of these stars tie into an approach, but the graphic showed an area of dispersion. Why can't all aircraft stay on the procedure? So maybe that is arrival routes. Christian, will you start with that, please?
Well, while different in many ways, aviation's a lot like driving. And if you were on the Watterson today, it's kind of the same thing. If you're the car on the Watterson, you can do whatever you want. Nice and peaceful. Add 2 cars, not so bad. Add 300 cars, and suddenly we see a big change in how smoothly things go. And so it really just boils down to that. We have built procedures that are as safe and as consistent as they can be. But at the end of the day, that's kind of where air traffic control becomes air traffic control, and the challenging job that it is that creativity kind of kicks in to say, how do I get these two planes that are going towards the same point together, sequenced in a way that one goes before the other, and so on and so forth, as long as it takes. And Greg helped me out with that. I don't feel like I'm touching it right. I think sequencing ultimately in those dispersion areas is what the best answer I could offer would be.
Right. Well, if you think about it, you'll have when these procedures are launched, you'll have aircraft on those arrivals coming from all directions, but they're not all going to show up perfectly timed to land on the runway. Excuse me, my light just went out. They're not going to be able to land on the runway all at the same time. So the dispersal areas are the result of necessary vectors to get those aircraft spaced and sequenced so that they land one at a time, and also with the correct distance between them. And that's one of those things that's unavoidable. So no matter how modernized the procedures are to get to or from the airport, there's still a certain level of manual technique that's required to get those aircraft on the ground. And so that's why we see those.
I would add to that maybe the helicopter question, Greg, that we brought up before, which is if I have a medevac helicopter, there was an aircraft, maybe I could have turned in at a certain point, but I waited a little bit because I knew my medevac helicopter had to get downtown. So we waited just a second longer to turn those. And it's all those little variables that come into play. Sometimes, as I described before, there's a cell of weather that the aircraft doesn't want to turn to. And if you were on the plane looking at that cell of weather, you wouldn't want the pilot to turn into it either. So I think all those little variables really come into play that create that dispersion area. But every time it's one aircraft, ideally we want to get them from A to B to Z as quickly as possible and as smoothly as possible. But that dispersion area is really about variability.
I'm glad you brought that up, Christian, because one of our biggest challenges, and I think I mentioned it before, the Class C airspace is 10 nautical mile at its widest dimension. But that's just the controlled airspace. The delegated airspace, where Louisville Tower and Louisville Tracon provide radar services, extends 45 miles out in all directions. So as we're controlling these aircraft as they come into the area, they're not always in that 10-mile ring, obviously. And so we do have some airports nearby, very close and busy airports. Clark County, north of the river in Indiana comes to mind. Lots of aircraft depart out of that airport. They're not required to talk to us. We wish they would. We encourage them to. But when they climb off of that airport, they are in immediate conflict for some of our arrivals landing to the south. And so we often have to delay a descent or delay a turn for those aircraft to get to the final approach course just to maintain the separation. So that's another thing.
Maybe overkill for me, but I've been thinking about jumping in, so I'm going to. But it's if you go to the grocery store Wednesday next week, there are going to be a lot of people there day before Thanksgiving. And you might find yourself asking the question, where does the line start? Are you in line for the checkout? Amusement park. You go on a holiday, their queuing process is a little bit different. Sporting event. I know Virginia came to town last week and played Louisville. If you get in line to get a beverage during the game and you go at halftime, you're going to find a long line there. And it's not unlike that. If you're trying to land at Louisville in a peak time, that line extends out a little bit further, and it's just different. So the job of the air traffic controllers is, again, I know I heard this answer, but turn you on as quickly as you can. But sometimes you got to fly further to get in line and get behind everybody else who was there ahead of you. Hopefully that helps. But really, that's why those aren't always exactly the same path into the arrival stream. Maybe that helps. If not, I just wasted 30 seconds. So I'll move on to the next question. We have a request. Please show that the turns for northbound runways again, 35 left and right. So I think the team can pull that up. Thank you. So we got the departures here for 35 right, 35 left. Jeffrey or Greg, either one of you want to walk through just any highlights on that again? I don't know if there was a specific question, but maybe someone just wanted to focus on where the procedures are. So we can leave that up for a minute.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. So I think, again, to review this procedure board, to start, the planned procedures are the magenta tracks. And the idea is that we use those day and night, no matter what, assuming the wind and weather allows us to. And when departing north, they would fly those precise tracks. The tracks were modified after the initial departure point so that those aircraft make their turns over the river and not over the city. And what you can see here in the colored ones, the blue, the green, the yellow, those tracks are from current operations that don't utilize those GPS-based procedures. And that's what we're getting away from. So you can see the dispersion, the immediate turn off the airport right now. Departures off runway 35 left are assigned a heading of 330 degrees. That's to the northwest. And when they track out over the city, you can see how dense that is. It's the dark blue. Eventually, they fan out as they make their turns. It's less predictable. It's safe right now, but it's just less predictable. And right now, it's a little bit more onerous for the community. So the intent on these new procedures to the north is to mitigate that.
Thanks, Greg. I find it interesting. If we leave the chart up for just a second, is it Lockard? To the south, you'll notice that Lockard appears on a couple of, so it's you could take off from the west runway or the east runway, and eventually based on destination, you're going to find yourself on that procedure. We don't necessarily send every aircraft. We don't assign a run, or air traffic doesn't assign a runway based on the destination, but you'll see a number of the procedures are duplicated, if you will. They're different paths, whether you're going from the east runway or the west runway. Greg, feel free to clean that up a little bit if you want.
Yeah, it's a good point. So, and one of the beautiful things about the new designs are that we can utilize those procedures from either runway, and still have the procedural separation. So theoretically, an airplane that would have to taxi to, say, the west runway right now could go to the east runway and still have the same safe, efficient path out of the area and onto its destination. So that's one of those things we're able to include in this redesign. Less time taxiing on the ground is good for passengers. That's good for noise mitigation. The neighborhoods aren't going to hear those engines as much or as long. And so we think this is going to be a vast improvement for our efficiency.
Okay, very good. We'll continue. The next question, will there be any changes to the Delta Class D airspace over Bowman Field? Greg?
Short answer on that is no. And just for some to expound on that, the Class C airspace, what we have here at Louisville, the next level down is a Class D airspace, or Class Delta as we call it. And that's what Bowman Airport has. Bowman is very close proximity to SDF. We work with them all the time, talk to them frequently. We actually handle the instrument arrivals into Bowman Airport. But the Class D airspace dimensions are not going to change at all. Not at all. But it is tucked in close and underneath the outer shelf to the east of the SDF Class C. So it's something. That's a good question. But yeah, no impact on that airspace at all.
No impact on airspace, but certainly the proximity. I mean, you accommodate flights into and out of both airports. I know we had a question previously about on the northbound departures, why they go straight out off the east runway. And I know the answer to that was because that airspace to the east is controlled, is Bowman's airspace. So if that helps paint the picture for folks wondering, there is that sort of interaction. We stay over here and you're over there. Okay. Well, we have a thanks, greetings. Thanks for this informative session. How will this allow for increased capacity for aircraft departing and arriving? So thanks for the positive feedback and the question. We touched a little bit on capacity. Jeff, do you want to start out on that?
I mean, I can speak to it again. I think we've kind of touched all sides of this. I mean, the separation standards and safety standards the FAA holds true won't change. None of that has changed. None of the you You can't put more cars any closer together on a highway, and you can't put planes any closer together in the sky. So that won't change. So to say, can we put more aircraft in there? No, not necessarily, but we can be more efficient. We can talk to the aircraft less. We can design it, and we have designed these procedures so that aircraft can climb and descend in continuous profiles, making things much smoother, giving the pilots much greater expectations off the ground, and or when coming in for arrival, lessening the workload for not only the pilots but the controllers, and that increases safety overall. We're just able to take advantage of advances in technology that allows us to do this. But as for increasing capacity or adding more aircraft for arrivals and departing aircraft, that will strictly be driven by how many people want to fly in and out of Louisville, and how many people need UPS to move their packages for them, through the Louisville airport. So it's really more about that market than it is anything else for when it comes to number of airplanes departing and arriving.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I mentioned it, I think I mentioned, but we attended the Louisville Community Noise Forum meeting. Several of us did on the panel last week and heard some good questions. So I can maybe take a little bit of time and share some of those and ask the panel for responses just to share that information broadly. I think I jumped ahead a little bit unintentionally because I was thinking back to that, but one of the questions was about why there can't be turns to the east off the east runway when we're in a north flow. And so, Greg, I won't ask again, but again, that's because of that airspace belongs to Bowman Field. So we touched on that one. We talked last Thursday about how high will aircraft be in the areas where the departures split into separate procedures to the southeast and southwest of the airport. We just had that graphic up. We could pull that back if that's helpful. But Greg, do you want to walk through that one?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. And Christian, feel free to chime in whenever you feel the need. But if you guys could pull the south departure graphic up, it's helpful to reference. Excellent. Okay. So the question is, how high will they be when those departures split and then head off into their various directions? By the time they're that far from the airport, the expectation is that they're going to be well above 8,000, maybe even 10,000 feet. One of the beautiful things about these new procedures are that because they are procedurally separated with our arrivals, barring any type of overflight traffic or conflict, they can continue their climb continuously. And so we can be reasonably sure that they're going to cross those points because those points are built into the procedure to cross at specific altitudes. Christian, you want to?
I would just add that weather creates some variability with that too. I've used that word a couple times tonight, I know, but on super hot super hot days when we see lift not being quite as effective, but I don't think we're going to see anything in the lower altitudes where people really see the impacts of noise. I think, like you said, 6, 8, 10,000 is where we expect virtually all of that activity to take place. And as you said, with the procedural separation, the aircraft noted they have certain flight paths they have to maintain. We were careful. I think we touched on in the last meeting that the aircraft are not putting the nose up to the sky and launching up like F-16s. That's not part of the profile. It still needs to be a steady descent, a steady ascent, a controlled ascent. That's not even a fuel efficient for the aircraft. So that's not something they want to do. But there are now specific requirements put in. We looked at, well, how high will an aircraft get by a certain point? And so we added a specific requirement there as a crossing to say, now we know where you're going to be every time. And that's kind of what you touched on with the procedural separation.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the climb. The climb rates aren't going to change. They're not going to power up. But what you will see is the elimination of those forced leveling at 5,000 or other altitudes. That's going to be a huge improvement in noise and efficiency for the pilots.
If I could just add something for
Sure.
Greg and Christian, you may want to talk about arrivals and departures at the same time, and the deconfliction and the planning that you did on all that, which is a huge safety improvement and reduces workload for everybody. So Christian or one of you, if you could cover that a little bit, it might be helpful.
Go ahead, Greg.
After you, Christian, you go ahead.
I insist. No, I feel, well, thank you, Jeff. I think you're bringing up a good point. Yeah, that's important. And again, I harken back to a point I made earlier that with you on the panel, it's very easy for people to think just packages, right? Just brown planes and packages. But there's a lot of people that come in and out of this airport every year. We mentioned some of the events like Derby and Thunder and what people come in for, coming in as the Louisville football, for those who are Louisville football fans on here and excited to see where the direction the team's going. That's going to draw, sometimes more people on these special events. And as we have that, now these things are built in. So when people come from out of this area for those events that aren't familiar with it, they don't have to figure it out on the way. It's just built in for their plane and they can do it. And not to take away from what the pilots are doing, because we know that's obviously a critical factor, but adding to that level of safety to just allow the planes to do what they do best.
Well, and I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit more, Christian. Let's not forget, we're neighbors of all of you. In fact, a lot of you ask me when I tell somebody that I work at UPS, do you know this person that works at UPS? Because there's 25,000 UPSers living in the Louisville area, and they are those passengers and they are those neighbors that you work next to. And so that's very important to us as well.
Great point. All right, I think almost everybody jumped in on that one. One more question we may have touched on a little bit earlier, but are procedures for each flight operation selected based on the aircraft destination? So maybe Christian and or Jeff want to chime in on that, but part of it's the procedure. Maybe behind that is also the runway.
Oh, I'll get started on that. Yeah, I think that down the road, by down the road, I mean your destination being Atlanta, we know primarily what route that aircraft is supposed to be on. So 9 times out of 10, the procedure that aircraft is on is going to accommodate ultimately getting to Atlanta. But other times we look at the FAA is looking ahead and sees there's severe thunderstorms in that area, or there's a lot of conflictions, and the procedure may change to accommodate that down the road. And again, if you're a passenger, you want that. But then again, we're talking about things that are happening down the road, not in the immediate area of the airport, not affecting noise in these communities. That won't be a factor for that. But I would say by and large, if you're going to the east or the southeast, it will be one of those kind of like we've talked about that are on that side of the airport headed that way. But there's a little bit, again, variability in how that plays out too. Jeff, I know you guys like to kind of have that consistency and know where you're going when you file.
Sorry, Christian. And Greg, I'll come to you in just a second. I was going to say, but the procedures are all connected to both runways. So I know we made that point earlier. Greg, do you want to add anything?
Well, I was just going to mention that following on what Christian said, the airlines file the flight plans based on what is most efficient for their system, and also to fit into the FAA overall traffic flow. And this is where maybe Jeff Chester might want to chime in because he's got the larger picture. Indianapolis Center is where he operates out of, and they own the airspace well above Louisville and surrounding the area. So they are a huge piece of the puzzle for the national airspace system. So the airlines file the flight plans, and the flight plans are going to be somewhat driven by what the destination is. If there's weather, some sort of impact on the system that requires a reroute, then they may fly something different. But that's just want to add that.
You may have stolen Captain Jeff's thunder. I don't know. Jeff, did you have anything else to add?
No. The only thing we add is, we also, there's a lot of efficiencies in this logistics exercise in all of our airplanes departing in that condensed amount of time and what side of the airport they're on when they start to taxi out. But the bigger issue is it's also based on aircraft weight. We talked about cargo airplanes being much larger or much heavier that will mandate which runway we can take off of. I think most people know that 17 left is shorter than 17 right. So you will see a large preponderance of our bigger airplanes taking off on the right for operational necessity, because they need that. They need to land to take off on that for that additional runway. I mean, for that additional distance, excuse me.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'll add a couple things. I think it's a great design because even if they are going to depart on the right and go to the west, those procedures are still available. They're not having to be vectored off and taken off. But to answer the question, is it based on destination? Well, yeah. Honestly, a lot of the destinations have specific routes or arrival stars that we talked about here for those airports as well. So these departures line those aircraft up for those arrivals at the airport that they're looking for, or that they're headed to. So we certainly wouldn't want to send somebody out going westbound that was trying to get to New York. That's the only time we'd ever do that is if thunderstorms or weather just demanded that was the only way they could go. Otherwise, we're going to send them out to the northeast, or send them out to the north and turn them northeast. If they're trying to go to Florida, we're certainly not sending them out to the north. They're not going to take that north departure. They're going to come out to the south, right, and go south immediately, because that's the most efficient route. And that's really what we're looking for, the most efficient way we can get them connected, get them climbed out on the departure, and then get them connected to the arrival going into whatever Florida-based airport that they're looking for. So I would say yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is complicated. How's that?
No, I think we probably covered that one. I, again, appreciate the depth of the answer there. This one will be quicker, I think. Jeffrey, I'll keep you on point. Is the airspace going to be changing its dimensions with this project at all?
Significantly, actually. Louisville approach, SDF approach has gone up to 10,000 feet for pretty much the entirety of their existence, and they're going to go up to 13,000 feet now, and they're going to expand significantly to the north and to the south, giving them more airspace, more opportunity to be efficient, more opportunities to talk to the aircraft sooner, and to get the aircraft into places on departures where the center is expecting them. Aircraft efficiencies have improved significantly over the years. When this airspace was designed in the 50s and 60s, it did not take into account jets flying at the speed that they're flying now, right? So we're very excited to modernize that airspace, and I would say yes, and it's going to be a huge improvement for them.
Greg?
Yeah, just to clarify on that, and what Jeffrey is referring to is the delegated airspace.
Right.
We talked about the Class C airspace, the Class D airspace. That is the controlled airspace, the regulated airspace. That, again, is not going to change, but the amount of airspace that Louisville controllers now have responsibility for beyond those Class D and Class C airspaces, that's going to be much larger and better designed, because we fit together with Cincinnati to the northeast, with Indianapolis to the north, with Lexington to the east, and as those come together, we're feeding Indianapolis Center with our departures. We're handing off to them so that they can do their work, and then receiving from them. So the way it's all woven together is going to be much more efficient now with the expansion of the delegated airspace.
Great point. Great distinction between what's happening with airspace and delegated airspace. I think I got that right. Very good. All right, let me jump to the next question. A lot of good questions tonight. If someone wants to make a noise complaint, how do they do that? Brian, I may tag team with you on this one.
Well, sure, Michael. I guess on our end, from the airport's perspective, you can do one of three things, or we have three options for you. You go to flylouisville.com, and you'll see on our webpage there's a place to make a complaint of noise. You can also email our manager of the environmental programs, who handles our noise program here at the airport, Bob Slattery. And his email address is bobbob.slattery, SLATTERY, at flylouisville.com. Or you can contact Bob. Just give him a ring at 502-363-8516. And those are the three ways you can file your complaint with us.
All right, thanks, Brian. And of course, FAA, we have a lot of information on noise. Not only, information on noise. We have a chat bot that folks can ask questions, and we'll do our best to connect you to information about ways that we're trying to make improvements with noise. And then we have a location also under faa.gov/noise, where if you want to file a noise complaint, you can go through and enter the information for that. And my office is typically involved in those as well. So try to stay synced up and a little bit of teamwork. You can come either place. Hopefully you'll get the same answer. But thanks, Brian.
Brian, you'll take compliments at that same contact information, though, right?
Yes,
Doesn't
sir.
have to be
Good
complained.
point. Thank you. We welcome those.
All right. Another question. Has the FAA made changes like this at other airports? Certainly, yes. We have. We actually had a large project in Florida that wrapped up a couple of years ago, and we updated the airspace and procedures in and out of 21 airports in Florida. In my region, which again is the southeast part of the U.S., we had a very similar project in Raleigh-Durham area a couple of years ago, and then we have some airspace projects. But my peers around the country are implementing other performance-based procedures into airports really around the country. So it's part of a national airspace system modernization. And we've touched on community engagement. I mentioned the link that you can go to. So Louisville's there. There actually is a website on some activity just to the east or northeast in Cincinnati. And we have an active project there as well with a project video. But you'll be able to see, if you are interested in other parts of the country, where we have information posted on similar projects. So that same website, if you Google FAA community engagement, you'll find that, or you can use your favorite search engine. Greg?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we've actually been through this process in Louisville before, about 11 years ago. Christian and I were both involved in and it started to reveal, to show my age here, but that far in the past, we were revamping the procedures in Louisville and using those satellite-based navigation departures and arrivals. They weren't as advanced back then, and right now we're just leveraging the newer technology and the improvements that have come over the years, like Christian mentioned, with the better motorcycle helmets. So this is not something new for Louisville. It's just an improvement over what we've been doing.
That's great. Go ahead, Jeffrey, please.
Yeah, and I would just add that we've had really good success with these types of procedures throughout the Midwest, Detroit, Cleveland, Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis already have these types of procedures recently put in place and have shown great increases in efficiency. And so bringing that project into Cincinnati, and then right on the heels of that, bringing the same thing into Louisville really kind of ties everybody together and brings the major airports all up to speed, I guess, with technology. I don't think speed's the right word, but I think you understand what I'm saying there. It really does modernize the system throughout the Midwest and helps a lot.
Great illustration of the connectivity between a lot of the destinations there. And Greg, I appreciate you making the point about satellite navigation not being new to the area, but really being updated. In some cases, we're introducing it for the first time, but that's not what's happening in Louisville. Okay. All right. Next question. The video showed how the runways are used to reduce noise over certain areas. Can we review that again? We could pull a slide up. I don't know if that's specific to the times. Jeffrey, do you want to start that out?
I mean, I certainly can, but I think Christian and or Greg, who deal with the contraflow every day, is probably better served to speak to it as daily experts with that.
Very good. Greg?
Yeah, I have to jump in on that. So this is showing a combination of our contraflow and our reverse flow operation. So the contraflow is what happens at night when the cargo activity is heaviest, where we land to the north. So I'm gonna start from the bottom and work my way up. We land from the north from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. And then in the morning, when the outbound, and I say morning, it's 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. at the very top, it shows south flow from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. And that's when we launch the fleet out. But during the day, we employ what's called reverse flow. So we know how many arrivals are going to come in during the day at any given time. And when there's more arrivals than departures, then we can turn the airport, we can use the runway selection in a way to minimize the number of airplanes over the populated areas. So in the mornings, we'll start out by using north flow at 9 a.m. And we'll run, and actually I don't even know that that's correct. It's 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. I think that slide might be an error. So then we turn the airport around and reverse all the flow and land a different direction. So I'm not sure that slide's helping me much explain the case, but we work really hard at doing that. It is not an easy thing for aircraft in the air to suddenly all change direction and land a different runway. In fact, pilots are planning their runways and their the approach procedure they can expect many miles out. And so when they show up and we change the flow, that's something that creates workload for them and creates workload for the controllers. But it's important to the community, it's important to the airport, and it's important to the tower to be good neighbors. So we try and comply with those flows.
All right, thanks, Greg. All right, there's another question. Can you elaborate on the noise study process? Gregory, I know you shared information earlier. Do you have anything to expand on or maybe cover again on that process?
Sure, Michael. Thanks for that question. Excuse me. We look at several factors during during our NORS study. We factor in air traffic operation and fleet mix. We also look at where the aircraft are currently flying, comparing to the new procedures or procedure changes. We also factor in runway uses as well as several other factors that are involved with the process. For this project, the noise screen does not show any change in noise from the proposed procedures. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Gregory. Kind of stay on that theme. Can you tell us more about the history of noise abatement at Louisville? We've heard that going back quite a few years, UPS and the airport have worked together to try and address noise issues. That may be be great to hear from you, Brian, and Captain Jeff.
Yeah, sure. I'll answer some from the airport's perspective. Back in 1990, we had the environmental impact statement prepared for the Louisville Airport Improvement Program. That was a program that expanded the airport back in the 90s. And from that environmental impact statement, there were mitigation measures that were laid out for us to follow. And some of those included the acquisition of properties around the airport with our relocation program. We've been mentioning the preferential runway use program. And also contraflow was really the main mitigation measure that came out of that EIS when we did that major work back in the 90s.
Thanks, Brian. Captain Jeff?
Yeah, UPS and trying to be a good neighbor is really partnered with the airport and the FAA, and it's donated lots of simulator time. I'd say easily over 100 hours, and we've even done test flights to prove some of these procedures. Probably when I initially got here, we'd started looking at improving arrivals, but just most recently, like I said, we've been in the simulator probably over 100 hours, just validating that these procedures work and that they're the safest that they can be. So, and we're happy to be a part of that, and not because it benefits UPS necessarily, it does, but it actually benefits the community and all the airlines that fly into Louisville.
Very good. Okay, thank you both. Trying to be mindful of time and some remaining questions. Will these procedures reduce the need for air brakes or reverse thrusters on the runway? Jeff, you probably could, Captain Jeff.
Yeah, what it does is it allows us to do a quieter arrival into Louisville. As far as when we land the airplane, we've already incorporated minimum reverse idle into so that we have a lower noise footprint on landing. Consequently, we might have to use a little more brakes, but we're willing to do that to reduce the noise.
Michael, if I could just come to the defense real quick of the pilots too on that, is the fact that things go, I don't want to say bad fast, but things can change fast in aviation, right? You have aircraft that are in the air doing 200, 300 knots, and we just interpret it for miles an hour. It's pretty similar on the ground at the landing speeds that they're coming in when they touch down. There's a lot of runway there, but that lot of runway can go away pretty quick. And when you're on board, you've got a loved one on board, you don't want to push it to the last minute. And I think the pilots, Jeff, you can maybe just speak real quick to what your landing speed is and kind of what you're touching down. I don't think people really realize how fast those million-pound aircraft are going when they touch down. And even though all that runway is in front of you, it can go away pretty quick if things go south. And I know you guys, it's a real critical time for you.
Yeah, runway behind you doesn't count for very much, Kristen. That's an excellent point. Yeah, and it's also weather conditions dependent. If it's wet, snowy, obviously we will use all available means to stop that airplane as quickly as we can. And we validate all that data before we land to know exactly what we need to do. And then, for instance, if we were to catch a tailwind and push us down a little bit further, we know what to do. We're trained very well to do that. So I think that answers the question.
I agree. Thank you. Greg Petto, I think you touched on this maybe or teed this up a little bit earlier, but will these changes be permanent or could the routes change again in the future?
Well, they could change, but if there were a change, because it's a big project and it's time consuming and there's a lot of factors to consider. So if they did change in the future, it would have to have a valid reason, like design criteria changes for safety or efficiency, industry requirements, or air traffic requests. And so, as I mentioned before, we instituted a whole set of GPS-based procedures 11 years ago or so, and we're just now getting to that improvement process and working through those steps. But before any of that is done, environmental reviews would be done. That's required by law. It's not something that we would do very fast or flippantly. It's done with lots of consideration.
Thanks, Greg. And I'm sure Gregory was nodding with that one in agreement. So yeah, key point, it's been a number of years, a little bit over a decade since the last. Doesn't mean it'll be any exact time frame, but it's not the kind of project we do on an annual basis. Okay. So this question is similar to something we've heard before. The words arrival and approach were used by the team. Can you explain the difference? Jeffrey, I think you helped us with that maybe Tuesday.
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit on Tuesday. I think people don't understand, and I know I certainly didn't before I got in the aviation field, that how far away an arrival would start. I mean, that standard terminal arrival route, you'll hear the word STAR, and we kind of abbreviate that. But that arrival may start out over Columbus, Ohio, or over Evansville, Indiana, or far western or far eastern Kentucky, a significant distance out. And you'll may hear the pilot come on and say, we've begun our initial descent into the Louisville airport. And that's kind of, gosh, I guess the best way I can describe that is you've entered the grocery store, you're wandering around that day, and you do everything, you got everything in your cart, and you find yourself all the way in the back of the grocery store, and you're like, that's it, I'm leaving, right? And I'm on my way. Well, from the back of that store all the way up, all the way to where you get right to the checkout line, right? That's that arrival, right? Then you get on the approach in that checkout line. And then really at that point, you're looking out the window in an airplane and that ground's going by really fast all of a sudden. And that's, to me, kind of how you can tell a difference when you're on a plane. Or like Mike, you have a good example too, and I don't want to steal it from you, so I won't. But just suffice to say that the arrival starts significantly farther from the airport than you would ever think it would. And you're a very scripted route all the way down from there, and then the approach is just maybe 3 to 5 miles from the airport. So.
If I could just add to that, we go through a thorough briefing of the arrival and the approach, and it's actually 2 different plates, and we walk through all the arrival to include the points, the altitudes, and we confirm that those are properly loaded into our flight management computer. And then on the approach, it's basically think of about 25 to 30 miles away from the airport. That's when you start your approach. We're at the lower altitudes, and that's when we start to slow to configure. And those would be 2 different things. And we thoroughly brief that approach plate based on landing performance, make sure it's again loaded properly, the configuration of the aircraft, what brakes we're going to use, if we're going to use min, medium, or max auto brakes. So it's all those things are briefed as those different parts between the arrival and the approach.
All right, thank you both. Keep partnering up with Greg and Jeff and Jeffrey, but I'm going to keep us moving. Again, we're coming up on time, but we have a handful more questions, so probably getting close to the end. How is this different from next gen, or is that what it is? I'll jump in on that, but next gen is a term that we use for a broad set of modernization efforts within the FAA. So we've touched on the National Airspace System, but I would say if you think about next gen as how we see aircraft, how aircraft navigate, how we communicate with aircraft, and then the automation systems behind those, that's an umbrella term that we use within the Federal Aviation Administration. So when we look at improvements like these new capabilities, certainly that falls under that umbrella. So this isn't all of next gen, but it falls under the term that we use. All right, another question. I live in Schnitzelburg near Germantown. Do you have any idea how DNL levels may change up or down with the new proposed changes? Gregory?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I'll go ahead and start out with this question, and then Brian could back clean up, if you will. The total community noise is not anticipated to increase due to operations associated with the new procedures, as I mentioned earlier in the previous question about our noise results a couple of questions back. They may help to reduce some overflight by keeping the aircraft a defined corridor during this process. Our noise, we did not have any significant noise increase above 65, nor did we have any what we consider reportable quantity at the lower end of the spectrum, started at 40 DNL at all. So everything looked good on the noise analysis. Brian, if you could answer the question relatively and talk more or less about the noise exposure maps and what you guys have moving forward with Part 150.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. Yeah, I think it's important to note that we are just underway with the process of updating our noise exposure maps. I've mentioned that before. And the timing of that is really perfect for us here, that we will include all these new procedures in that update of the noise exposure map. So the new procedures will be modeled in our study. And to answer the question, we don't know right now, as Gregory mentioned, but we don't anticipate an increase in noise due to these procedures. Thank you.
Great answer. Thank you both. Anyone
Michael,
else?
Can I just add one thing to that?
Please do, Christian.
I think Greg Petto, I think a couple times we've touched on this, getting away from the variability of headings at night, especially, we'll see a benefit on that as we use those headings. When that goes away and allows us to stay on the procedures, those consistent flight tracks will, I think, be a big improvement. I know those are hard words to say, but a big improvement for folks as we roll these out. And I just ask that the community, give us some time to get these out and work through these. And I think there's going to be, certainly on the southwest side, as we identified, and on the northwest side, where some of those flight tracks are very different than what the procedure is, I think we'll see a lot of improvements.
Thanks, Christian. Greg is nodding.
Yeah, I live over near that neighborhood, so I understand where he's coming from. The predictability that Brian and Gregory hit on, that's going to be the major improvement here. The predictability of tracks for departures, regardless of direction, regardless of time of day. It's going to really isolate those flight tracks, so you won't see the dispersion over the area. So, and I'll be in Schnitzelburg enjoying the area tomorrow. Is my plan. It's a great little area.
All right, great. All right, last two questions. Are planes typically quieter in the fall than summer? The past couple months have been quieter than they were this past summer. Are heat or humidity a factor in that? So first of all, I'm going to note it's been quieter. We'll just celebrate that for a moment. But Captain Jeff?
Yeah, aircraft perform better in colder weather. So given that requires less thrust. So yes, they will be quieter as part of that when it's colder.
All right, very, very good, very true. Anyone else adding to that? Just really the temperature and yeah, there can be other factors like winds and whatnot that change seasonally as well. Okay, so a final question for the panelists tonight. How do you know the new procedures will be safe? And I won't go in any particular order unless you make me. Does anybody want to start that one out?
I can jump out to start if you want, but I'll just say that every procedure we have is designed to very specific safety standards, and those safety standards actually are continuously increased with the advent of new aircraft and new aircraft types and capabilities. The FAA is continuously adjusting and adapting their rigorous safety standards, and these had to pass multiple layers of testing to be approved under the newest and highest level of safety standards we've seen in a very long time. So I'll start out with that, and I'm extremely confident that they're going to be exceedingly safe.
Great. Captain Jeff?
Yes, Michael, like I said, myself and other UPS pilots, because every time we get in the simulator, it's two pilots flying these procedures, have gotten in with Christian and team. And we've personally validated that all of these procedures work, they're safe, and they work in the most extreme conditions, meaning heavy weight on a warm day. Heavyweight aircraft on a warm day can meet all of the requirements to execute. So we're confident that they're extremely safe and actually much more efficient.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments from the panel?
Well, I just might add that experience has kind of taught us what works and what works better. And I think that's kind of where we're moving to now. We've had, as we mentioned, Greg said earlier, 10, 11 years ago, we put the procedures that we're doing now in. And over that time, we've been able to kind of look at what would be better than this, what would be safer than this, what would be more effective than this. And this whole process is really a culmination of that in collaboration with how does it affect the community? How does it work for the pilots? So it's, I think its experience has really taught us what works best as well.
All right, very good. And I'll just cap that off with saying at FAA, it's always safety first. So there's absolutely no way we would implement a new procedure without it either providing safety benefits or being safety neutral. We've spent a lot of time in this workshop talking about how this particular proposal has a number of safety benefits. So I know we're excited to bring that to the area, and I'm certainly appreciative for the team that's worked to go through the designs. I mentioned our time with the Community Noise Forum last week, but really that's been an ongoing partnership involving the airport. UPS is a role in that, and members of the community. But again, I think we're in a good place. Captain Jeff, I'll steal your term, but win-win-win. So I think that's truly what we're bringing to the area, and our team's excited about that. So that is the end of the questions. We had just a great number of questions tonight. Good questions. I hope our answers were informative. I want to thank everyone who sort of connected with us tonight and wanted to learn a little bit more about the project, maybe had some questions. I hope that it was informative for you all, and certainly we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Please remember that you may still formally comment on this proposal. You may email your comments to the email address that's shown on the screen, or if you have a smartphone handy, you can just scan that QR code that's on the screen currently, and that'll just pull the address up for you. If you prefer to send us written comments, you can mail those to us at the address also shown on the screen. Please note that all comments must be sent no later than December 22nd of 2023. So again, I want to thank our specialists for providing a great deal of expertise. You guys really are experts on not only the operations, but the proposal. And thank you for sharing your time and information with all the attendees tonight. For everyone, remember this workshop's being recorded, and the recording, including all the slides, the videos up front, the addresses shown here, the QR code that's here, will be available on the FAA's YouTube channel right after we conclude today. And I hope you all have a great evening. Thanks again for attending. Good night.